Okay, now we are live on YouTube already.
Yes, we are there. Okay, can you return to me for the host function? Because I even cannot see the lobby.
Done. Check. Let's check.
Okay. Okay, Mas Sidik, you can start admitting the participant. It's already 37 in the. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the four siap. I think we will wait for another 2 or 3 minutes before we start to give opportunity for the others to join us. It's around 51 participants now. Okay, we will start in 2 minutes. Okay, good evening, everyone. I think we can start now. It's already 3 minutes past of the time. Okay, we will officially start this session today. Good evening, my name is David. We will see a video first. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session. This is a regular project management knowledge sharing from PMA Indonesia chapter, or we also call PRANKS. This is the 12th edition for this year, and we have 2 special guests and 1 special moderator here. The topic today is the topic today is dealing with project resilience in current situation. The first panelist, apologize. The first panelist is Professor Saligram Pokarel. He is a professor in Qatar University Doha. He is a mechanical engineer by honors by first degree and system design engineer by master's and PhD degree. He also worked with the government of Nepal on energy planning, and he also teach in University of Waterloo, Canada, Kathmandu University, Nepal, and also Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, before joining to Qatar University. His research in the area of engineering management, namely energy planning, logistics, and supply chains, and also project management. He has published more than 100 international journal and conference papers. The first Panelist is Professor Bambang Trigunarsya. He is a professor in project management. He is an associate professor in project management at RMIT. His professional experience previously was working at Hatbay Oil Malacca Strait in oil field development project. His academic experience is in University of Indonesia, Queensland University of Technology Australia, and King Fahd University of Petroleum and Mineral in Saudi Arabia. His research interests are in the area of post-disaster reconstruction, infrastructure, project delivery, project governance, constructability, operability, and maintainability of infrastructure project, and also project management in developing countries. He also has co-authored more than 35 journal articles, 11 book chapters, and more than 120 conference papers. He has also supervised to completion to 22 PhD and 1 master by research students, as well as more than 100 master theses. So before we start the session, the moderator is Dr. Muhammad Iksan. He's a scholar and professional project management practitioner with broad experience in multiple industries, such as information technology, telecommunication, banking, and construction. He is currently as part of faculty member of Business School undergraduate program. He also a PhD in strategic management with research area in strategic project portfolio management and project management office. He's also a former PMI Indonesia chapter president and also former PMI Region 15 mentor. Before we start the session, we have some rules. So all participants will be on mute and videos will be turned off. And if you have questions, submit it in the chat box and put Q before your question, so the moderator will be easy to identify your question. Also, the third rule is the session will be recorded. The fourth rule, we will distribute form link in the chat box if you need PDU or e-certificate from this event. But for the auto submission for the PDU is exclusive for PMI Indonesia chapter member only. And then the last, happy learning and give us feedback. I will give the stage to Mas Iksan.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak David. Good evening, everyone. Welcome in our webinar, the PRANKS 12 from PMI Indonesia chapters. It is my greatest honors to moderate the session today, to be together with you, and also moderating the two key speakers during this session. Allow me to add a bit. So our distinguished guests today have somehow or part of the journey of PMI Indonesia chapter. So allow me first to add on Professor Saligram. He was the former Region 15 mentors. I think it was the time from 2010, if I'm not mistaken, to 2013. Hopefully I was right. Otherwise, please correct me, Professor Saligram. So Professor Saligram. Oh, 2009. Okay.
2009 October. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for the correction. He was the one who who encouraged to boost the growth of PMI Indonesia chapter as well as the PMP numbers of PMP in Indonesia. So his effort, in convincing me at the time, especially when I was the chapter president, was the impact was very good. It was it's a huge impact. Hence we made our our result, and I think it was back in 2000. Correct me again if I'm wrong, Professor Saligram. I think it was back in 2011 or 12. Prior to my departure from PMI Indonesia chapter to be the region mentor, Region 15 mentor, when Indonesia was all awarded as the fastest growth PMI chapter in the region at the time. So we were.
2013. That's 2013.
2013. Okay, so we were very happy at the time, to bring our trust back, that we as a chapter can manage this. And also the Professor Bambang, he was also part of the founding fathers, from PMI Indonesia chapters. Allow me also to highlight that he was also part of the first PMP holders where the exam was still, a written-based test, right, Professor? So when lucky us when we had our chance to to do it as part of computer based test. Okay, today we are going to discuss two things. So allow me to start with the subject with the road to resilience that is going to be presented by Professor Saligram, and then later will be followed by project resilience. And after these two key presentation, there will be a Q&A session that has been put in the opening of this webinar today. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over this session to Professor Saligram. So Professor Saligram, the session is yours.
Thank you, Iksan. Thank you very much. It's good knowing you. I mean, a long time ago anyway. I think we met together in December 2009 in Singapore I think in Novotel Hotel or something like that. And then the journey starts from there for me with Indonesia chapter. And I'm very happy that, Indonesia chapter has taken under your leadership from almost, very low level chapter to very, very high level chapter, very energetic chapter, I would say. And it is continuing with the leadership now also. And then I can see, I'm always looking at how Indonesia chapter is doing. So I'm always in the, on the information of Indonesia chapter. The one I'm going to talk about today is based on my own perception. So there's nothing called theory over here. There's nothing called, whether this is actually happens or not happens. So what I am trying to do with Prof. Bambang is when we understand this kind of situation for crisis management, which we are facing now, what should we talk about it? I mean, how should we assimilate things in this perspective? And then when we assimilate things, can we correlate some of the things that is useful for us as a project manager? Or, some of us might be working in the NGO, non-governmental organization. Some of us might work in the government sector, and any sector that we work, we are impacted by the situation. So if you allow me to share my screen, let me go back over here and I hope the screen is all well received. Yeah, Iksan, yes?
Yes, Professor. Yeah. Very clear, very clear.
So I will talk about road. I mean, the road means, you are taking a road until you reach to the destination, you should continue taking that road. I mean, if you're determined to take go to the destination, you have to continue. So what are the phases? What are the aspects basically we are trying to work with in terms of, project resilience? So I will touch only a few things before project resilience, then we'll pass it. So you see, crisis happens everywhere. Like, for example, Indonesia, I come from Nepal, we have situations like flooding, we have situations like earthquake. And in these two cases, basically, the problems are mostly localized. Means it can happen in a particular village or a particular district or a particular province, but it normally doesn't go away in terms of flooding. And even for tsunami, it's like that. I mean, it can toss the whole coast, but it doesn't go inside too much in that one. So those problems are basically localized problems. It can affect the settlement which is around it. It will also affect the critical infrastructure which is around it. For example, we know in Japan, even the nuclear power plant was impacted. That's a critical infrastructure. Then the idea is to bring things to normalcy, whatever is normalcy means, in terms of the settlement and in terms of overhauling, repair, reconstruction. How long does it take? I don't know, to be very honest. It can take, any time between a month to any time between, 4 to 5 years time. I mean, it can be longer than that one. The second part is, for example, earthquake. It can be localized or it can be scattered. I am from a country where I see a lot of earthquake also, and I think it's same. I mean, it's same with Indonesia also. So it's localized. It can be localized in one place with a devastating effect, or it can be scattered around the country. So the whole settlement in this particular case, which is affected, those are impacted, and critical infrastructure around it are also impacted. And then again, the new settlement has to come to bring back to normalcy, and a total overhaul, repair, reconstruction of those infrastructure has to be done. So basically, when we look at the crisis like this, a part of the crisis is actually known. It may not be known when earthquake is coming, but we know when earthquake will come. So idea of management in this case, whatever we do in terms of assimilating all the resources, basically idea is to bring it to normalcy, to a state where many things can happen after that. So I was thinking about how does it work. So if you look at the economic growth or productivity on the left hand side, and if you look at time on the bottom side, in terms of flood situation or hurricane situation, problem is actually known to strike. So we know that what's going to happen. Then the problem strikes after some time. Then response has to go, and then the response will continue, and then there will be end of the period for the response to continue. The idea here is we are looking at the economic growth. So what happens is in a particular locality or in a particular province, the growth pattern can be like this. So it starts with a normal situation which is already there. The productivity goes down because some of the infrastructure cannot be reused. People are, working on basically bringing their things into normalcy. And then after some time, when we go to recovery period, so then the recovery starts, and we nowadays people call it about B safe, U safe, whatever safe is that, maybe bathtub safe, whatever. Then the recovery starts. The idea is to bring the recovery to the state that was before. And in terms of support, if you look at what it is done, we need to prepare for planning. In that particular case, because problem is known to strike, then we have to respond. When we are responding, actually the productivity is going down. And then after the threshold is reached, minimum threshold is reached, then the recovery has to start. So we need to look at the planning policies for the future. And by the way, these are continuous process. Flood happens, you have some planning policy, lesson learned, and you go for the next one. So if you look at the project management side of it, then we have started somewhere before that. Okay, anticipation is there, things happen. So there are projects and policies in place. Some policies are there, but when it is almost certain things start happening, then you have pre-planning, preparedness, first impact, what you call supply or management. Then you go up to the largest level at some particular point. Then the service starts waning out. So this went out, at a level which was starting somewhere over here. Then it will go lower, and this lower side after some time, I don't know how much is that one. Then this point is actually basically somewhere over here. So that means there is a lull period after a cycle of project management goes into picture. So if you look at the earthquake situation, there's a little bit different. In this case, the problem strikes right away because we don't have any anticipation. Then the same type of curve starts, but then our what you call response is similar, but response can take much longer. For example, we have earthquake in about 5 years ago in Nepal. The impact of earthquake has not finished until now. So we are still continuing. It's about 5 years. Maybe it's going to be about 10 years. So those things are going to happen, but there will be plans, policies, standardization. Those things are going to come into picture. So if you look at this one over here, Delta 1 means the time from the productivity minimum to from that time to productivity normal is actually, we don't know how much it is. This could be time, this could be level of productivity, and we don't know how much it will be. We don't know how much it will be. This one will be. We don't know how much would be the recovery. How long is this going to be, and how long is this going to be? We cannot predict these things. But the thing is that if we're working on the management of this kind of things, we need to have patience. The third situation is like pandemic now. So in this pandemic situation, we start with the problem situation, which is known as a stage one. Then situation starts showing some impact. The situation starts accelerating, starts weakening, back to controllable situation. Then all the cultural part comes into picture. So we need to have some preparedness for impacts. Maybe there is preparedness before. We need to have planning and policy for the future. So our curve can look like this. I don't know how deep it will go. Maybe it will be negative. I don't know. But the shape is going to be like this. This shape can be a very prolonged shape in order to come to the same level as before, and then to move on from that period. So the idea in pandemic management that if we're happy with this situation coming back to normal, maybe that's not very good. We need to look at the situation where we increase the productivity, increase the performance. So, at this point of time, we don't know whether it will continue like this or it will continue like this. We don't know. But our attempt always have to be to move on to this particular area. So there are all deltas and productivity and everything, the time taken. We are not sure how long it will take. So the problem is being persistent becomes very important. But when we come to this particular place, we need to be aware of any situation that can happen in the future and can create similar impact, which is not local, which is regional, national, and in our case, it is global. So how do we look at all these situations? So we need to look at how do we manage this kind of situation? What is this delta 2? How long will it take to go from the minimum to normal? And then from normal to the higher level. So innovation, impact in terms of the funding, new process, new policies, those are all coming into picture. So if you look at the service part of it, a very large service level has to be there. The impact has to be very big. It might start somewhere in the beginning because situation might be known somewhere else. So the policy plans, those have to be done right from the beginning. Then when the problem is known, you start assimilating yourself. And then when we come back to some stage over here, then idea is things become like a culture. We must do it. We have to do it. This is the way to do it for the next level. So this defines the three different type of situation. But for two type of situation, because they are transient, they're coming up, very small time, and they don't need a very prolonged period of, impacting the process of project management or managing that. I will discuss about the third situation, and I'll try to relate that into the situation that I'm here in now in Qatar. Okay. So which knowledge area? So most of the time when we're in project management, we're trying to learn something, we try to look at the knowledge areas, what is their impact? In my point of view, the main concern over here is not integration. Maybe I'm wrong, but my view is that the main concern is the scope. So I will start with the scope. So goal is very clear. That means we want to go to either a normal situation, which is over here, or to a situation which is much beyond the last normal. So it can be new normal. I don't know what is that new normal means, okay? So the goal is very clear. The idea is to protect the public. So if public business, we can talk about it, first is public. So if public is protected, business can be protected too. So then if I look at the government scenario, and when I look at the publications that I have received, it says that state of Qatar is taking all measures. There's no limitations. All measures. So the scope is very wide open to protect the public and plan for eventualities. So if we look at the last part in the graph, plan for eventualities. So that is going to be continuing right from the beginning until the end. So the idea is to protect the public. That should be the main thing that we're going to look at. Then the second part is the preliminary scope that is developed right in the beginning, as I showed you before. Then details are not known that time, but we have some kind of idea what's going to happen, how it might move. There might be some lesson learned from other countries. So we look at that one. Then we have to plan to meet the goal to protect the public. Planning of scope is implementation anytime. Some of the scope can be closed in between, by the way. So this is basically continuous. So there are overlapping identification, planning, implementation, and closing all the time. So it's an overlapping process, and scope has to be revisited almost daily basis because we cannot take chance over here. Then if you look at this one, the second part is what we do. We anticipate that when the things start, it should not go to this level because the facilities that we have may not be able to cope with the situation that we're facing. So the idea is to bring it down as much as possible by forcing some of the, some of the measures in order to make sure that the goal is raised as fast as possible. So if you look at this one, this is not new. That this is now. If you look at this one, this is Sweden. This one is Taiwan. This one is Australia. This one is Nepal. This one is India, and this one is New Zealand. So if you look at this one, the idea is to force this peak down without lockdown in this case. Whether it is successful, unsuccessful, still being debated. In this case, the policy measures, it was successful because maybe a wider level of, anticipation because of the SARS that happened earlier. If you look at Australia, I mean, I'm not looking at one city, one province, by the way, in general. There was lockdown, then again, another lockdown, maybe it will open soon. Nepal, same case. India, okay, there was a lockdown during this period. Then after that, I think around June, starts going up. New Zealand, peak was over here, lockdown, but then it has all come back at a very small scale. I mean, is this new? Is this the scope in this particular case is varied, depending on the country, but is this new? So when I look at the 1918 situation, it's not new. Similar things happen in New York, in St. Louis. You look at the lockdown over here, but there's no lockdown in this one. But if you look at the other part, there's a lockdown when it was peak was not very big, but then second lockdown, and eventually in about 2 years' time, the whole situation got cooled off. Then it went to something called normal. If I look at the second part, which is integration, that's very tough. Most of the people say that there's no integration because we don't know when it is going to finish. That's correct. And I mean, I take this one, basically, some of the knowledge over here from Sanar and Debir, who wrote a book called Reinventing Project Management. So they treat it a little bit differently, but I look at it from the point of view of practical measures. So in terms of integration, there's no short-term integration. There is a spaghetti. So things come from anywhere, but we need to fix it into one basket. They must be carried out, although they may be seen as unnecessary at the end. So I have to do, maybe lockdown was not necessary. Maybe keeping people in house is not necessary. It might look like that now. I mean, when we finish it up, but at this point of time, those are very important things. So small scale integration happens in the project, although they may, when we look at the project end, they may not be, very influential in the beginning. So if you look at preparation of pandemics, you look at this one, the risk management guide for pandemic situation was developed in 2013. Looks like just in time in this particular case, but it was a very big lesson learned. And then it was easily can be transferred into 2019. So what it means is that the countries have to get prepared in managing this kind of situation, just in case it happens. So then extreme coordination is very crucial. There should be someone from the very high level of the government, like prime minister or minister or very high level. They have to exert their leadership. They have to exert their management and coordination. That only can help. So if I look at Qatar, His Highness the Prime Minister is on the top. Then the National Committee of Coronavirus is chaired by Her Excellency, the Minister of Public Health. So that means there is a high level dedication from the top management to support the project management project to contain the pandemic. If you look at further in integration, each stage is progressive integration. So we did this one, we're successful though. So, okay, let's close this one, let's go to the next one. So there should be high level policy direction. All the time the direction is going to come. There should be daily appraisal for integration part of it. There can be changes in the course, how we're moving in terms of controlling pandemic. There could be lower level integration, but implementation part has to be very, very strong. There is centralized coordination in terms of how effort is going, if effort is happening, then also there should be policy for the future. So if you look at this one, the whole process, it has to be research, infection prevention and control, communication, preparedness, surveillance and detection, response and containment, recovery. These are all things which promote integration of management of pandemic situation. So integration doesn't come from one aspect in any one time. It can be in from multiple aspects, but we need to make sure that the integrated outcomes are the one which we are looking for. If you look at the communication, one of the parts that we do in, is look at the external communication outside the team member, internal communication within the team member. So there should be one door policy, because people have to receive the information, the right information. Nowadays, people call fake news actually. So they have to look at the right information. They have to have the right kind of format to provide the information. Guidelines have to be followed. Frequency of providing information. What type of awareness material that has to go out. Those things have to be clearly planned and implemented. So informal integration, basically communication pool has to be there. So everybody who is involved in this particular system, they have to provide the communication to the highest level so that it can be rephrased, reorganized, and the next move can be developed. So there should be very, very high level interactive communication at the high level. And if I look at Ministry of Public Health, we have a very nice one window information policy. You name what you like about, what you want to know about COVID-19, you get it from there. Not only that, we also have a health status. I also have it in my system. If my temperature, whatever is okay, I'm in green zone. Then if I have some fever, then I have to go to the doctor. It becomes yellow zone and something like that. So communication management becomes one of the crucial part, and communication management from both sides, internal communication and also external communication. If you look at the procurement side, project procurement has to be very open in this kind of situation. We need to first identify what is available. Inventory, it could be in terms of the material, but also inventory could be on many other things also. There should be a one-door procurement at the first. Whatever it happens, the item has to be divided into strategic and bottleneck items. For example, if we don't have that, we cannot tackle the situation properly. And also they have to be done in terms of leverage item, for example, sanitizer and mask. They are low risk item. Initially there might be a problem in terms of supply, but eventually supply builds up very fast in this case. So low leverage items can have multiple label purchase later on, although in the beginning it is a one-door procurement. But for the bottleneck item or the strategic item directly needed to tackle the situation like testing material, ventilators, those are basically strategic and bottleneck items, and they have to be done. So is it done? In terms of inventory, there's a food, goods, and medical supplies. So those are all basically have to be planned. So the government has planned that, and they have looked at something, for example, what are the measures being taken to meet the needs of the customer? Should they buy in bulk? I mean, the government said that I already have stable food, quantity, and the prices will be managed. There are face masks, sanitizer. I mean, all things have to be done properly, procured properly, and at the same time, it has to be communicated properly to the masses. What about the cost? Cost is one of the difficult things because we don't know how much it's going to cost. There's a high cost of testing. There's a cost of procurement because you have to bring things right away. There's a cost of developing facility because after those facilities have been developed, when the situation comes to normal, they are supposed to be basically dismantled. So life cycle of those facilities can be very low, very small. There is operation assurance, business assurance. Those things have also to be done because economic activity has to take place no matter what, at least at some level. So there should be a facilitation of budget for recovery, how much to provide, to which industry to provide, and to which individuals to provide. There should be heavy load of contingency, and we have to control it. There should be management of expenses without any control. There could be direct support, salary support, other support. When I look at Qatar situation, two things over here in terms of support. 75 billion Qatari riyal, that's about 21 to 22 billion US dollar financial incentive is announced for the private sector so that they can bring back to normalcy. And also for the government funding of 10 billion Qatari riyal to increase investment in stock exchange so that people feel confident about the business. That is for Qatar. If you look below, they look at the different sectors, economic sectors. This, by the way, this is one out of 4 different areas they have looked at support scheme. So they find that aerospace, aviation, and tourism is the highest impacted sector. So, and the 50% of the wage is going to be paid for 7 months, 7 more months. That's about in April, I think April or May that they produce. So I think in March 2021, it will be continued to pay. Built environment sector, 50% of the wage paid, arts, entertainment, 30%. So what it means is that the government needs to identify the sectors that are impacted so that the rejuvenation of those sectors can be faster. So if you look at the last graph, I said about the pandemic, the last part is how fast you can come out from normalcy to the higher level of innovation. In terms of resources, assimilation of resources is necessary. We need to have supply security, food, medical supplies being the first one, raw material supply being the second one. Then capacity of inventory has to be looked at, enhancement has to be developed, resource have to be pulled wherever it is available, whether it is a material resource, equipment resource, or people resource, okay? Maybe prior 10 people in health, security, planning, management, NGOs, maybe that can be right kind of people. We need to look at their capability and also capacity of testing, capacity of laboratory, capacity of going to different cluster to test the COVID situation. Those things are necessary. Also in resources, facilitating leadership, centralized organization, high autonomy, those things have to be there. And in this kind of situation, the leaders have to be on the top. They are always on the top, by the way, but people have to look at the leaders, their position, and they have to be followed. For the bottom part of it or the middle level part of it, if there is a new information to be provided, new way of training to be done, that has to be done too. And the technology, for example, it may or may not be available, but if it is available to facilitate, that has to be used right away. So here I show you, for example, incident management team in Qatar that has been done. There are many stakeholders on the right-hand side involved. And then if you look at the bottom one, also facilities that has been involved. If you look at the last one over here, it's about new facilities being added, so resources being added. And if you look at this one, this is for the announcement or monitoring of community gathering in Qatar. So these kind of things have to be coordinated and used at the same time. So there is a very high resource management skill, okay, over here. Then if you look at the quality, we have to have 2 things over here: quality assurance and quality control. Main thing is, if we have a policy, the thing is that we have to follow it, because once it happens, it's difficult to come back. So we need to look at use of quality materials. We need to look at the standardized treatment. We need to look at the quality of testing, procedure for isolation, quarantine, treatment, and many others. We also need to look at the enforcement of security measures, because one of the things that can happen is whether it is security level for just facilitation or enforcement. I think the way we have seen, enforcement works much faster and with more efficiency than just facilitation. Then capacity source management, sometimes you need more. So you need to look at how much is the required source. So we need to have a valve. I mean, I don't know how possible it will be, but we need to have some valve to open it up when the new resources are required or new type of capacities are required, so that quality can be controlled. So there are guidelines over here: suspected confirmed cases, for example, interim guidelines for management, guidelines for collection, handling, storage, transportation of specimens, the protocol for laboratory testing, national guideline for quarantine measures, and there are many, many other guidelines which have been developed, put in place, so that everything is done to develop quality part of it. In terms of schedule, the difficult part is when it is going to finish. Almost all activities in the path are critical. There's no slack over there. There's no float over there. All activities and schedule are dynamic. They can change, they can come back. So we need to look at how we can control it. Even not only that, when to lockdown, when to release it up, relax the lockdown are also have to be planned properly based on the given situation. So if you look at Qatar situation, 15th June is first phase, 1st July, we are in third stage now, and maybe phase fourth is 1st September, depending on the situation that time. Almost last one is about risk. Very some knowns, many unknowns emerging. So guidelines have to be there, reinforcement has to be there, communication has to be there, full skill support has to be there. Again, enforcement becomes in the, critical in unknowns. Then we need to prepare for the worst case scenario. So we need to develop the scenarios, how we are moving, which way we are going down, going up or down, and very high chance of failure at any time because the lockdown happens. So then suddenly new cluster emerge somewhere. So this is, our lockdown is relaxed, new cluster happens somewhere. So these things have to be understood. The project cannot be new risk taker, cannot be risk taker. It has to be risk neutral and it has to be risk averse. I mean, mostly risk averse. And the final one is about the stakeholders. Unknown stakeholders, known stakeholders, unknown can appear on the way. So we don't know, I mean, new cluster happened, we did not anticipate that they become the unknown ones. Management should focus on those affected by, affecting, and vulnerable. So who are very much prone to get those kind of situations. And the stakeholder is not only internal, they are also external because we are global countries and we are global economics. So we need to have a plan, internal plan, who are NGOs, schools, universities, media people, religious institution, even the government rules and regulation, the industry, business, they're all part of the stakeholders. And the stakeholders, they might have some kind of requirement, they might be impacted by someone, but at the end of the day, we need to meet the goal that we aim for. So in summary, managing exceptional situation needs exceptional project management capability. So, the thing is that over here is that most of the time, there is no PMP type of people who might be handling this thing. But the thing is that collectiveness, clarity in terms of scope, integration, these are the three things that has to take food before we start anything at all. The project management capability needs to be integrated approach, going from top level all the time to ground level and continuous feedback. Public and business assurance is very important because people have to feel that, okay, this is done very well, just like the way I feel over here, it is done very well. And then the focus on project management is an overlapping phase. It has to be identifying, initiating, planning, implementing, monitoring, controlling, whatever we know about, PMBOK guide. Over here, they have to be all the time together. So managing everything together needs the capability of integrated knowledge. And there's no one bullet in this particular case. The focus is to attain the goal to move everything back to the pre-exceptional situation, if it is exceptional, and to achieve the higher order of performance. So that means when we have a situation like this, which is not related to one particular thing, we need to look at the situation or the system coming back to normal or going beyond back to normal. These things bring something called resiliency is the system, and which Prof. Bamang is going to talk about. So I will close now for now, Dr. Iksan, then we'll talk about this a little bit later. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Saligram. I think, it's the temperature is higher, is rise somehow, some questions has just popped up. So then I would like, without any further ado, I would like to hand over this session to Professor Bambang Trigunasya, and this session is yours, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ihsan. So let me share the my screen. Okay. So is it sharing?
Yes, Professor. It's there. The
Okay,
is there.
thank you. So it's red and white. People probably think I love Indonesians very much. So, but that's the actual color of our MIT. So, first, I want to thank PMI Indonesia for inviting me to what you call it, shared knowledge. the topic is very, very important, but a topic that is not easy. I mean, Iksan asked me to talk about it, and then I told him the time is very short to prepare, so I need to find some sources. So it is a topic that probably need to have some attention, not just because the pandemic, the resilience itself is become a topic of interest for many researchers in the last 10 to 15 years, I think, but mostly looking to resilience of peoples or resilience projects, meaning how people, society become resilient into some things like, for example, from disasters and so on. But when we talk about project resilience, so that's probably a different thing. So what we want to check is the resiliency of our projects. So so that's something that probably we will see. So as I said before, I mean, I'll try to find some resources, and there's not much actually people working on the area. So I come across few references. Means so far, I mean, when I search in my libraries, it's only few, and then and there are many pop up, but they're from the same resources. So I come across one papers, and then it's actually referred to a few theses. So I think it's a good probably topic for a research, like a PhD research or something. So if anyone who interested to do a research or PhD, probably we should talk about it. Okay, so I think we start with the definition. So as I said, I mean, it's more about project resilience. So one of the definitions is used or defined by Gimbaso from their thesis. Is about the project system's ability to restore capacity and continuously adapt to change. So that means what Professor Shaligar explained before, means how we recover from the changes. So it's about to fulfill its objectives, going back to the objective and the goals, and to continue functions to the fullest possible extent. Okay, except the in spite of the threatening critical events. Another definitions, again, from another thesis. So if you see that 2017, it's very recent. So it's just a few research in this area. So this definition is about capacity also, the capacity to respond to prepare for, and to reduce the disruptions, the impacts, disruption impact, to recover and ensure successful completions of our project's objective, goal and objective, right? So see, I mean, the authors suggesting 4 dimensions, which they call it proactivities, coping abilities, flexibility, and persistence, right? The third one that I'll probably will that I will use in as a main reference for my talk tonight is come from Turner and Kutz. So they also publish books about project resilience. So if you try to find one book, I think that's the only book that you can find about project resilience. So I will share you about their approach in the following slide. So their definitions about project resilience, they use the word art, right? So the art of detecting changes in the project environments, understanding these changes. So detecting, understanding the change, interpreting, and then planning to answers, and minimizing the changes when change occurs, and adapting to the new reality. So I think that's probably can like sum up our condition now. I mean, most people, we said that we'll never go back to our normal, so it's probably new normals. In Melbourne's, we're not normals. I've been stuck in my my house, in my room here for the last 2 months. It's actually now it's almost 8 o'clock, so curfew is almost starting in 10 minutes in Melbourne. So we cannot go out unless you want to be fined by the police for a few $100s. So that's not normal. So, but there's a new normal. So that's the 3 definitions. So I will, as I share, I will share the last definitions. So this particular definitions means address one thing. The main things is about uncertainty. So if we look at the resilience, why it's not that much been discussed? Probably because we focus more on the risk. So the unknown, the known unknowns from the past, but we're not really probably comfortable to talk about the uncertainties. So when those authors or people start looking at the uncertainty, they start looking into the unknown territories, right? The more complex, the unknown territory. So they argue that the uncertainties is unpredictable, but doesn't mean it cannot be managed. So unpredictable, but not unmanageable. So it's a good kind of like probably a thought or approach that I think we should probably learn and see how we can apply it in our own projects. So if we look at the projects when we have a race or uncertainties, right, means that will create some crisis, like Professor Swellinger mentions before. So we need to recover. So if we can recover, that means we actually have some resiliencies. But if we look at the way that many or project management approach that being used currently is mostly what we call it, or they call it rule-based project management, right? So it's project management that actually, in terms of risk, is based on the past occurrence that inform futures, right? So we talk about forecasting, planning, forecasting. We assessing and then we planning for the futures for our projects and try to prevent that risk from occurring or the impacts or reducing the impacts from to our projects, right? So the in this approach, we try to we'll see the risk and we try to design out of project. Means we design the risk based on the probabilistics and the semantics tools. So remembers in our risk standards. So when we assess risk, the probability of occurrence and the impacts, right? So think that there is we can assess them, right? Okay. Uh, so this one, there's a benefit, of course, right? Because we have a structured approach, then we can follow it. But what happened if it's something that's never been experienced before? I mean, happening, like it's probably pandemic. I mean, although there is a Spanish flu, for example, in 1916, I think, or 26, but the scale of the problem is probably a lot more than then. So it means now it's really affecting the whole world. So what we're gonna do about it? So we don't have any experience on that. We cannot see the probabilistic and the impact. So we need to deal with that. So what they suggest is what they call it mindfulness-based project management. So they argue that we should put our cognitions, right, the human cognitions at the forefront of dealing with these conditions. So because the rule base is actually we have so many tools. I mean, sometimes some of them being automated, right? Because I mean, we say that humans prone to mistake, to error. So we try to replace by automations, but there is some conditions that is difficult, means because there is no or very limited information about the past occurrence experience. So if there is the case of the uncertainties, then the humans cognitions is probably the best in if they've been put in front, right? So the aim is not to actually find the best choice, but to probably create an options in what we can do, right? Because we don't know it is the best option or not. I know there's some questions about the strategy and so on. So it's probably the people who deal with the projects know the best in how to deal with that particular condition, right? Okay, so and again, I look at or they look at from the perspective of we are running a projects, right? So we are dealing a projects and how we deal with them. Okay, so the pandemic probably is one of the issues, but there's other thing. So it's rather than forecasting, assessing, they're talking about noticing or trying to detect conditions and then interpreting from that conditions and then preparing, right? And then try to contain the conditions so we can go back to our probably goals or objectives, right? So that's the main difference. So the idea is only in the following slide, I will focus, try to probably briefly share what they uh, suggest or recommend in each step of those process, right? So the first one is about noticing. Okay, so the good thing about what they suggest is they divide it into four kind of like states. First, they try to understand the temptations. I mean, what they call it, the lure of different states there. I mean, when we try to detect what is the temptation that we face, and then after that, the enablers, the importance that we can do a very good or an effective notification, noticings or identification, right? And then what kind of leaderships or leading and how we should lead these process, and then how that impact to the relationships, right? So the first one is what is actually a thing that allure or tempting of certainties. We always want to be normals, right? We expect normalities because we have some comfort zone. Uh, if we not fit our expectation, we tend to disregard them. Okay, so we'll try to just working in our comfort zones, and then so we probably have a very good track record in our project performance. So we become complacent, right? We think that things work, so we start putting our guard a bit down, and then we try to focusing more on familiar rather than something that unfamiliar. Right? Now, when things happens like pandemic, we're not familiar with anything, and the scale is totally different. Means they're different in terms of the government's level. They try to different things, right? Means we probably heard about the suppressing and eliminations approach. Uh, means there's two approaches, I mean, but they're still, I mean, people not familiar, so they just try to find the right way so they can, so that we're not familiar. And then people, or we tend to aim for things that we can measure, right? So we can manage. So like we can assess the probability and we assess the impact, so we can manage them, right? Uh, and then the next ones, when we talk about uh, uncertainties or risk, for example, we tend to look into the negative side, right, rather than the opportunities, right? And hence the fixation. So when we are fixated to some things, we preoccupied with a matters that we face, for example, we tend to lose the ability to detect the other probably opportunities, okay? And then that make us become short-sighted in terms of looking on the what can we achieve or what will happen to a short term rather than looking a long terms approach to the projects, right? So that's the temptations that why we can probably make a mistakes in dealing with the uncertainties. So as I mentioned, the second stage is the second part is more about the enablers. So the first one is the main one is acknowledging that this uncertainty is there, right? And they are complex. I mean, also the complexity is also there. Means we cannot say, oh no, there's we should not dealing with the uncertainty. I mean, remember the 0 to 1. 1 is certainty and zero is uncertainty. So we should not dealing. So I mean, according to them, I mean, I think I agree. We should try to acknowledge there is uncertainties. It's not about if, it's about then when it happens, how we're going to deal. And then we should be vigilant. Right? We should accepting that there's deficiency means in terms of knowledge. So we perceive uncertainties and usually as our based on assessment. Okay. And then we should have freedom to be vigilant, right? Because we need to have kind of like uh, a sense of uneasiness, right? So we become alerts, always become alerts if something's happened to our projects. So for that, we required some space to form of time to spend in terms of detecting failures or sign of failures. So if as a project manager you preoccupied with the administrative tasks, it's difficult to look at something that probably will affect our projects. And then reporting cultures, right? Means when there is some report about probably signs that about something is not good, don't blame the messengers. Means look at to the message. What are the message tell us, right? Because if not, people will probably try to uh, avoid tellings what can happen to our projects, right? Means I think we probably somehow and sometime experience this case, right? Uh, and then cross-functional teams. This is also important because typically it's when we have some issues and new issues. I mean, multiple perspectives will help us in looking at the problems. Uh, and then there are some tools that we can use to help us. I mean, some of us probably learns about scenario plannings, try to simulate the conditions. What happen if this, for example, disaster occurs? What we're gonna do, and so on and so on. So we try to be using whatever tools available to help us understand or being try to uh, later on improvise what we should do, right? So that's enabler for noticing, and the leadership that is required means they need to battle these complacencies, right? I mean, to make people uncomfortable or go out from their comfort zone, okay? uh, and then also provides a safe culture so they can speak, right? And then uh, when there is a report, we should ask about the evidence, or we challenge them. I mean, even it's a good conditions, and then we probably need to ask them whether there's something that's going wrong, right? So we need to ask them, making people's imagines using some tools means what can happen, for example, if there's some uncertainties and so on, right? uh, so we can look at from some idea, like a brainstorming things, idea in how to deal with different this particular scenario. Just remember, it means probably nobody have experience, so I mean everybody can probably share their opinions, and we can assess it or evaluate them. uh, and we try to we should probably strip the adversity in them from negative connotations, like in remember, like in these pandemic situations, there are peoples that actually I will not call it sell benefit, but means they can probably get other opportunities, right? I mean, for example, now everybody looking for a mask, right? Okay, I mean, if you try to buy a mask, is always difficult now. We could take time to deliver, okay? And then focus on issues, not on the persons that bring the or raise the issues or the problems, okay? And sharing the adversities. So that's the leaderships. And then the impacts on the relationship. So because we try to address the competencies, we always want to see that it's not just about us, other stakeholders in the projects, owners as the project managers, to the contractor and others, the suppliers, and how they should look at become more compliant, not become complacent, because it probably will have will create problems, right? Uh, right, and then okay, right. So yeah, set some of the impacts. Okay. And then when we identify those issues, we look at the how we see or interpret the situations, right, or the issue or the problems. Means there is some temptations also to make it simple, so make it things look at from a simplistic perspective. I mean, we try to, I mean, become very optimist that because our project is always good, then we cover everything, right? And then we try to normalize everything. So that means past experience become just like some things routines, right? And in the practice, then we are okay. Right? Just remember this uncertainty we probably not experienced before. And then it's also we probably think that it's not affecting me, right? It's probably affecting others, but not me. Okay. We also tend to oversimplify. We focus on the event, right, on the risk, but we don't look at the big pictures, how that integrate it to the projects, the whole projects. Okay, I mean, in achieving the goals, because it is more about interrelation between activities and so on, right? And then about the probability and impacts, right? Means it's best experience. So if that's we are very comfortable with that, but it can probably make us feel optimist about that we cover everything, right? Uh, and then when we develop estimate, for example, that estimates become commitments. So there is no other thing. If something's wrong, then that's the problem. That's the error. There is no should not be an error. There's something that we have to keep all the way to the end, right? So become the anchor of our projects. Right? If something happened and then we still have to go back to that particular estimate. Okay, so another temptation is that we tend to forget the difficult part, the difficult experience, and then keep the good one, right? So we want to share the good one and then probably look or seen good by the others. Okay, and then also the perception of losses and gains, that we tend to look at the losses rather than the gains. So we need to also look at the uncertainty as also probably a gains, right? The enablers, right? The interconnections, because we need to understand the interdependency between different part of projects. Like if you build a house, you have the foundations, the structures, the roof. If the foundations have problem, we cannot install the structures, right? Even though we already completed. So we need to look at the connections. And then become devil advocate. Things become criticals, try to challenge what's probably people think have been something that probably good or has been works before, right? So we can look at whether there's if something's happenings, we probably be ready, right? Against memories, we try to refresh our memory, not just the good one, but also the bad ones, right? And then do the what we call it, the value-driven risk management. So because when we do a value-driven project management is to shift the focus from detailed deliver project into the value that the projects bring, right? The project activities bring to the achieving the goals. So that should be the same with the risk, right? When the uncertainty comes and we assess against, then it should also look at how that bringing a value to our projects. The leadership for it means the project leaders should ask the inconvenient questions, but probably not in the uh, uh, forceful way, or is something that you can ask, but means to make people's think outside their comfort zone, right? Uh, the leaders also should focus on the opportunities rather than just look at only the negative sides of the uncertainties, right, as well as the risk, because there's also something that we can bring upon. And then the ability to distinguish or differentiate between the noise and the real risk and uncertainties, right? Because we can probably ask a question whether it's happened before. If it's something that indicate systematic risk and uncertainty or uncertainties, okay, uh, will it influence part or functions of our projects? It is criticals, right, and so on. Okay, And then so the leader should address the so what questions, right? To create means decide in them to be on a lookout for problems, right? If things okay, good, I mean there's something, so what, all right? If something happens, so what? Okay. Extending the half-life risk and uncertainty meanings we try to remember. I mean we tend to forget about the bad experience and remembers the good one. So we need to make sure that memory is with us, so we can use that in the future projects, right? And then being optimistic. With all this uncertainty doesn't mean we should be pessimistic. I mean the leader should be optimistic and to ensure that uh, their teams, loses their morale and so on. Okay. And then it's allowing people's and to have and appreciate different perspective, right? Remember again, if it's uncertainty is something that's never we never experienced before, so other perspective probably is also is very important, right? And then we talk about the impacts. We should be reluctant to commit to singularities. We need to have an options, the possibilities. For example, if it is estimate, means we also have per estimate anyway, right? But it's not just become a single commitment. There's other possibilities, right? So using the might or may is probably necessary in some conditions. And then we should sell the capability to deal with uncertainties, not the illusion of uncertainties, because we need to also have the stakeholders understand that there is uncertainties, and then we should deal with that. Okay. And then understanding the diversity of perspective, and it should be done many times. It's not just one. So because we have multiple stakeholders, multiple team members, and then they have a different perspective, and then we should consider them. And then when we have interpret the conditions, the preparations, the preparings, uh, some of the temptation that need to probably to be look at and try to prevent to avoid. Uh, they call it the lure of fail-safe. That we're preparing for the expected, right? So that's the risk approach, the rule-based. We try to identify what can and have it if things happens and how we deal that. That's not totally thing. So we probably have something that we don't expect it. Okay, but we should manage. Sorry, we should deal with it. So that will means the past experience also make us uh, become less effective, because what we have now, the systems is there. We use it as probably more a text box things. We done this, we done that, without probably putting an understanding, a good understanding of what really happens, right? And then optimism bias is also is very dangerous, okay? Because we think that our preparation are cover more adversities or race and so on. But as I said at the beginnings, we acknowledge that this uncertainty is there, right? So we need to also prepare for that. And then I think 2-3 decades ago, there's a lot of research studies about knowledge sharings and so on. We try to compile everything's become standard procedures, and then everything's become on the shelf. We're not really reading. Okay, we actually just try to make an abstraction from what we think of what we experienced before, right? The other temptations, we become too rigid, right? Rather than flexibility. Yes, it's important to maintain some rigid, but we need to provide also some degree of flexibilities. And then we should avoid the silo mentalities, because it creates some hierarchical or layers for vertically as well as horizontally, and which is a risk by itself because it add a complexity in our projects, right? And on anchoring to something. So if we estimate something, that become like our anchor, we cannot change and we cannot adjust for it. Right? The enablers for that, we have to believe, right? We have faith. Okay, we should have a belief and confidence in the effectiveness of our preparations. We should have kind of like repositories of response. Okay, just like means our typical risk assessments, risk response. We can use simulations and games or practice or results. To make people's to have people's as close as possible to what the adversities that can probably happens, right? We also have some flexibilities in our process because we need to adjust as like Professor Saligrams mentioned before, because the condition changed. And then we have sensible planning horizons and then goal flexibility. So that's something probably become very sensitive because means the sponsor will say this is the goal, we cannot move, but that probably need to be evaluated, right? Means need to be refined or revised. Okay. So the leadership for that means to maintain that flexibility. I mean, goals means we should empower project members. We should break down the barriers in terms of the silos so we can reduce the hierarchicals. And we helping people, try to help people to get close to risk, right? By educate them. We incentivize beyond compliance, okay, in doing these preparations, right? The impacts and the lessons in, we need to integrate other stakeholders in preparations. Means I think that's just common things, and then addressing their discomforts, right? Right, and then uh, after the preparings, we should contain, right? I mean, some of the temptation is that we have the response that we used before, so become habit for us, and then tend to escalate, right? So when we start everything's rather than try to solve it, or we escalate to the next one. Okay. Uh, and then look at the problem of accountability. So we'll create some environments, blame environment probably means rather than try to address the problems, not the people's, the messengers. Uh, and then the isolations, we isolate the response for just particular issues, not looking the consequences to others. Okay, and then there's lack of time to reflect about our response, right? Because yeah, means we see what happens and how things, and then how things can be done better or differently, right? The key enablers is the commitments, right? You should commit to the works, and we have abundance of expertise, not experts, right? Because it's very heavy, difficult to have one person expert in everything. But if we have different experts, we have different perspective, then probably we can have a better solutions in terms of a problem we face. And look at the big pictures, improvise, right? Again, there's a new thing that we face. They probably need to think differently, and we should have a freedom to think, yeah, to deal with these issues or whatever issue that we face. The leaderships, important part of leaderships should increase the readiness of project team, including the stakeholders, to facilitate the improvisations, right? Create the cultures that enable them to slow down the progress, because we need to reflect, right? And in differing expertise, so we try to kind of like allocate how to do that risk or uncertainties to those who close to that risk, because they're probably the best in terms of dealing with that. We should dealing with the accountability, again, not about the person or the peoples who have that issues, but about the issue itself. We should support I call it the wrong containment. What is wrong in this? Similar to the previous one. What is wrong rather than whose fault it is, right? So what does it mean by supporting wrong containment? So it's not about uh, the one responsible, but more about what the problem is, and then should support the purposeful containments. The impacts of the relationships about assessing the contributions, drafting commitment to stakeholders, including suppliers, addressing the accountability problems, as mentioned before, and should never be a never-ending containment, right? Because it means the project will continue. Right. So, and then go to the recovery stage, right? So the temptation is to kind of like defense to retreat become with means the probably the team members feel that they become their problems, they become more inward looking to cover as individuals rather than try to face these issues. There's a broken communications because the accusations rather than try to find the problems. I mean, focus on the problem. So we become the communication become less more destructive. Decentralizing the powers rather than actually distributing, empowering to the people who close to that resource entities. And then we thinking and acting in the past. Remember about the comfort zones means because we experience that, we always think this is how we do it, but the problem with probably is different, and we're looking focus on one things, yeah, just like means, oh, in Indonesia we call it kacamata kuda, right? You're not looking at the big pictures, so on. So the key enabler to this stage is project continuity. So what are the key part of that project that need to be maintained or kept? Because if not, probably done, the other will stop. Okay. So I continue what I mean by a checklist. So I mean, checklist in here is probably is more about to help the project team, project manager in terms of probing the situations, getting more understanding about the situations. Closeness. Service allocated or empowered to those who close to the risk in certain situations, or have a special teams, high performing teams means who you should aim to reconcile the different opposing views and facilitate solution findings in terms of those control situations. So try to find solution. There probably some people from outside the project teams, or there's a combination of the two. And then shared logistical independence, and then sustain the commitment of all the stakeholders. Right? So the leaderships that is required try to, I mean, should make all the stakeholders ready. Should not easy to press the panic buttons, right? Should not easy to centralize, okay? Should maintain the trust, and then believe that the project teams have, I mean, they have the expertise, for example, should manage the behavior rather than the plans itself. I mean, how people deal with the plans and the situations, and then channel resources to where they are needed first, right? Means which one is the priorities, okay? Then learning from crisis, of course, right? So the impacts to the relationships to different stakeholders, we need to establish the clarity in the key contact points. Who's the key contact points? Probably the special teams. Be open and accurate about what being discussed. Listen, right? Means rather than probably start to talk, means it's also good. Can I advise there? We should listen more rather than talk more. Okay, and then on the crisis collectively, it's not just one person or the project team, or project managers ownerships. Think long-term relationships rather than the short terms, and then should share the burden of recoveries. And when it recover, you should celebrate the victory. Right. So it can be summarized on those steps. It can be summarized like you should to go to have a project resilience. So those authors means what they recommend is we should not to able to notice what happens, right? The art of noticing, to battles the complacency, moving the onus of proof, making people imagine, focused on the issue, not the persons, encouraging the sharing of phrase and so on. And then interpreting, go out from the comfort zone, asking questions that is inconvenience to people, focusing on opportunity, not just or not only the risk, the negative parts. Okay, distinguish between the noise and the real risk or sensitivities, addressing the so what question, keep the memories about the bad experience, uh, and being optimistic, and allow people to appreciate and different perspective amongst them, right? And then prepares by maintaining goal flexibilities, empowering project members, breaking down barriers, silos, helping people to get close to the race, and then incentivize beyond being just compliant. So if they can improve, then that's better, right? It's not just achieving the minimum requirements. So we get certificate, then it's done, right? So we have to go beyond that, right? And then containings by increasing readiness, facilitating improvisations, deferring to expertise means, remember, expertise, not the experts, dealing with the accountability problems. So the people not feel threatened because of the problems, and then supporting the wrong answers, right? Not the persons itself, and supporting the purpose containment. And then recovering, reading the stakeholders, being reluctant to or not too soon to press the panic buttons, not too soon to centralize all the decisions makings, maintaining trust, manage behavior, not the plans, channel resource, and learning from crisis. Okay, so I think that's the thing that's being what I can learn from this particular books, which is very interesting. So if you have a times, you should probably read this one. It's not necessarily that we have to agree with their approach. There is no right and wrong uh, probably approach. It means they have different things, but something that we should think about means we probably can do also better if we probably do means differently or do like what they suggested. Okay, thank you, Isan. I return the floor to you.
Okay, thank you very much, professors. I think, let's give them a virtual round of applause for both professors for incredible remarks that we have learned from them today. So before we come up with the Q&A sessions, allow me to provide you with some key summaries that I have learned from these two professors. So first of all, so we learned that from Professor Saligram that the crisis management, there are different type, different scenarios with different patterns. So in this case, we learned that there is no, there is no such pattern that we can anticipate from the very beginning unless there is already a pattern in a way. So we learn also from the that it is seen from the pandemic a part that the pattern get back from the long time in Spanish influenza, if I'm not mistaken, back in 1918. However, okay, probably people tends to to forget or to disregard this kind of information until the next pandemic wave is coming. But I also noticed, the remarks coming from Professor Saligram, when it comes to managing the crisis from the perspective of knowledge areas. Okay, it was also concluded that managing such exceptional conditions need very exceptional project management capabilities. Okay, and we need to be focused as well with the with the overlapping phase when it comes to managing them, and a secret recipe that there is no silver bullet in in managing this kind of exceptional condition. And I also learned typically also from the two professors, okay, that bringing back all these things is basically complex, but it's doable. So I noticed that there is a positive mindset Okay, that being optimistic when it comes to managing such turbulence condition. And from learning from Professor Bambang Trigunarsha, so it was a very insightful presentation, Professor. That we come up. We just realized that there is typically a new topics coming in, so it's a good opportunity for us for those who are interested to pursue PhD probably, or pursuing for another research in project resilience. And it's also interesting to find out that the project resilience is somehow is an art. Consider in comparison with the techniques or the science in managing this kind of exceptional condition. And what also I find very interesting is to learn the mindfulness based project management, when it comes to managing such condition. We learned that there are a few steps, okay, starting from the noticing, interpreting, preparing, containing, and recovering. What I also learned, it's also very interesting to notice that I noticed that there is a lure of fail-safe, Professor. So it indicates that people start to noticing that if it is going to be going wrong, and we need to know in how safe we are if we fail. Okay, so I think it's a very insightful information from Professors Bambang. And last but not least, I think also to conclude from both professors, leadership plays a very big role when it comes to managing projects in such condition. So I think that shall conclude, my key summaries, from these distinguished two professors. Before I continue with the Q&A session, I would like to know from PMI how much time that we have left for
Yeah,
this
it's
session.
actually around 30 minutes, Pak Iksan.
Okay. I think we can come up with some questions. Okay, I think let's come up with the first question to Professor Saligram. It's a interesting question, Professor. Hold on. There was a question related with also with supply chain. Okay. Flight bans, discovery of vaccines, purchasing power, all may affect the very existence of a project. How do you see this affecting future terms and conditions of supply chain contracts to ensure that projects can continue to deliver? Please, Professor.
Okay. One thing we need to be very clear when we start working on crisis situation or resilient situation that Prof. Amang is dealing, is that we're not working in a normal situation. That is our platform we have to start with. So when it is not normal, whatever rules, regulations, whatever perception you might be having in terms of a normal situation, they will all change. So it means that the paradigm that we have from before may not work in the new paradigm that we're working now. So when we're looking at resilience, the contracting part of it, supply chain part of it, they will change. I mean, when we discuss, when Prof. Amang is talking about, we need to look at the interpretation part of it. We need to look at the preparation part of it. I mean, I will let Prof. Amang to talk about that. But from my perspective, when we are looking at the new paradigm for management of a system, to bring the resiliency into the product, we need to think in a different term. So our supply chain contract will be different. So it could be one door policy with emergency purchase system, which is not normal. And then there's one of the follow-up question can come is, okay, how should I know how much inventory? You see, when we have emergency management system, there is a minimum level of expectation that emergency situation will happen. Okay, so there is a minimum level in every country. So that minimum level has to be pulled first. And then when we're pulling that one, we need to have a contract, emergency purchase contract, which is, when there is no supply, that contract has to be in such a way that it has to be open, it has to be properly coordinated, and at the same time, the supply assurance has to be there. This is difficult. I mean, I can say about that one. But when we coordinate all these things, it can be different. So short answer is we cannot say that normal supply chain or normal purchasing behavior would come into picture. Of course, you know, when if we had vaccine, this situation would not have come most probably, because all of the effort would be to get the vaccine. Okay, maybe multiply the vaccine in a large scale, and we will see that if the vaccine comes, situation will be different. So the effort in this case is sans vaccine, no vaccine. What should we do? So our situation has to be different. The way we handled before cannot be the way we handled it again. That's what I can say.
Thank you, Professor. I think maybe a few words from Professor Bambang.
Which one?
The related with this term and conditions when it comes to how do we change or anticipation when it comes to supply chain related with the terms and condition during this pandemic.
That will be tough one, because different on the different country have different things, because term conditions is related to if the two parties become a contract issues, right? I think one of my colleague from other university mentions about in another webinars, like in our context, there is no force majeure issue, for example, right? But they need to follow that. So is need to go back to if that's the contract and hence the agreements, or sorry, and hence probably negotiating or discussing with the stakeholders, different stakeholders, particularly the owners, about the conditions, right? So accepting there's a differences, there's changes, and hence I mean probably the goal need also change. So and hence that's why because of these some of the supply cannot be
Right.
Get it right, because I mean supply chain is one of the things that being affected the most probably in these conditions, right? I mean probably can happen, the resource is still there, but some of the materials is imported from other part of the world, and you cannot bring it. So yeah, that's probably my answer just now.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Okay, let's move to next questions. This is pretty much to deal with how we build this kind of capabilities when it comes to this, building up the project resilience capabilities. So we knew that there have been disasters or some others event previously. But it looks like we tend to be very easy in maintaining this kind of condition. So what do you think, Professor Saligram? What should we prepare in order to build our resilience? In this case, the project resilience.
The way I feel is we need to go back to where we start with. You see, when we look at in the recent history, when we look at actually this resiliency pandemic thing that can happen across the board, it happened in the near, if I go back in the very near, it's about 2003, 2004, so when SARS come into picture. The countries which got impacted heavily with SARS, they already started coming up with the clubbing policy. Clubbing means basically trying to share the ideas about how they have developed policies which can contain the impact of SARS, and then that can be followed in the situation later. For example, MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome also. When we talk about it, we talked about, there should be a reference somewhere. If there's no reference, we have 1918 reference, 1918 when the Spanish flu happened. The idea is the anticipation of the situation has to be there in the leadership. So if there is an anticipation that situation can happen, the resiliency can be brought up. So now, how we do it. Is it easy to say than to implement? The idea is when we look at the resiliency part of it, we are looking at the resiliency of two main things: one, people; another, infrastructure. The other parts are there many, but these two parts continue to improve the livelihood of the people and continue to improve the economic situation of the people. So how do I bring resiliency? Once things happen elsewhere, it is like Prof. Bambang said, it's not my cup of tea. It doesn't happen here. No, that's not the situation. It can happen here. So when we think about it can happen here, we need to have a broad-based label policy. Again, it comes from the government side of it. It comes from the large organization side of it. They need to understand that this can impact each and every sector. Are we ready for that one? And I can come back with one thing. When we go to school or university, they have, for example, something called a safety drill, yeah, fire drill. So we come out. Why can't we have pandemic drill? We need to be prepared. It has to be a culture. So when we don't have a culture, we cannot do it. I mean, culture to tackle these things. But if we have education, for example, how should we build myself next time? Now in primary education, have a pandemic drill at that level. Nursery, primary education, middle, high school, university. In each stage, the level of information has to be different. The drill has to be done different way. There should be education. There should be a chapter or a section in social science which will say that, okay, pandemic will happen. I don't know in what scale it will happen, how it will happen, but how do you prepare yourself in order to come up with that pandemic has to be education to everyone who are born today, who are going to born tomorrow. Then only we can build resilience. Otherwise, we cannot do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Okay, so when it comes to building resilience, professors, there is also building up, that particularly from people side. So I'm talking about the project managers itself. So how do you see in building up this kind of skills when it comes to preparing them to face the resilience?
Bro, Bamang, you want to take it or?
Oh,
Oh yes,
okay.
Prof. Bambang, of course.
So yeah, I think so. That's why at the beginning I mentioned about the words, the term resiliency. So we need to put it in a context when we talk about project resilience or resiliency or the people or the project persons that we're talking about, or other things, right? So what I mentioned before is mostly about the project and how you can recover from situations. Mean how what approach that is being recommended. But if you talk about people or persons, means in a way it's the same. So as a person's, I'm not in the area. It's probably mostly done by psychology peoples. That's why talking about soft side of project management means how you understand means working in the outside your comfort zone, for example, right? And then try to improvise other things, not to feel kind of like guilty or feeling inwards, and then develop your skills and then accept things that thing can happen where we never have experienced before, and then we should have there's always kind of like quote unquote probably solutions on that one, right? Means because it's new things. If it's new things, we cannot ask someone means how you do deal with that. Means nobody experienced that, right? But we talk about resilience in general. Probably I'm not the right person to us, right? Because as I said, it's more about a person. It's more about the probably the psychologies of the persons. But if the projects, then I think that's one of the approach that we can look into it.
Thank you very much, Professor Bambang. So the next question, now interesting question, is that when it comes to decision-making processes. So you know that as a project managers, they have to make decision in order to respond how they about the the way that this pandemic will or whatever condition that will affect their projects. So how do you think, Professor Shaligram, how do you think um, in building up these skills when it comes to decision making processes?
You see, like I said before, it's not easy, by the way. It's not easy, but it's not difficult. Why it's not easy? Because it requires the expertise not in one area. Uh, so we need to have skills, project management skills in every other area. How do you procure materials required for this particular type of situation? One type of skill. How do you integrate, for example, communication in order to tackle this kind of situation is another skill. But so it's not simple. I mean, it's not one short answer, but it's not difficult. It's not difficult means when a country is facing this kind of resources, the country also have expertise lying here and there somewhere. Okay, the identification of that one is important. So once we identify the right people, you see, one of the things that when I was going through the context that Qatar has done, the idea is to pool the resources, pool the expertise, whichever is expertise, wherever is expertise, every ministry is impacted, every
Right.
blood organization is impacted. So we
Right.
need to have that expertise. Now we have the basic expertise because situation is different. Collectively, you see, we need to understand the definition of system. Collectively, it is not, it's not 1+1. Collectively is one plus one equal to 5, or 1+1 equal to 100. So if we start collecting that one, then we'll go to first level of attack. Now, how do you improve that? How do you improve that? Because the situation changed. When the situation changed, the first thing we need to know are two main things. One is the technology available. Second thing is the information available. If we can match the capability with the availability of the technology and availability of the information, that's how the next generation of project manager comes into picture. Okay, that's my thinking.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Bambang, do you think still related with the decision-making processes? Do you think that stopping the project due this pandemic is also part of the resilience?
Uh, why not? I mean, I think, as I said, uh, you look at, you need to understand the big pictures also. Means probably stopping the project at that time, a long term, is better for the project rather than the short terms. Right? To force, probably you have to work, but there's some critical part of the projects cannot be done.
Mm-hmm.
So we spend resources, but the sector is not moving anywhere. So it's probably better to stop the projects. But some other projects is probably better to address, to continues, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the critical part is those who are the part of the project that are, if it's not done, will probably halt the other part. That become probably the focus, right? If that part cannot be done, probably doing other thing is probably is not a good decision, right?
And Professor Saligram, do you think it's quantifiable when it comes to measuring the effectiveness of this resilience? I mean, whether this is say it is abandon or termination of the project, whether the project is to be reprioritized. So, what do you think? Can we measure that?
You see, the way we have to look at it is that the way we measure last time that earned value, this much is the schedule we are at, there's nothing like that. We need to develop a new kind of metric. If I look at pandemic, the metric is very simple. How many people you moved away from death? Number one.
Mm-hmm.
How many people did you test every day? Number two.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you hit the testing? Because you can test everybody, anybody, but you are not hitting the right target. So what is the percentage of the people you rightly tested? And then you found that when you find that, you start containment process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you found that you have contended. So the last metric would be how many people recovered in the time that was mentioned to be recovered. These are four different metrics. This metric may apply differently in Indonesia. It can be applying differently in United States. But we need to have the metric. The metric should have the targets or the thresholds. And when you do that, when we do that, then we'll be able to see whether it is successful or not. So that means the scenarios, once the situation comes, the scenarios have to be developed. Scenario has to be developed in a situation where all the extreme conditions are taken into account. So if we are below the worst case scenario, we might still be okay. But if we are below the average case scenario, we are much better. If we're much below than the happy case scenario, we are doing very, very great. So this metric has to be different. We cannot measure in a normal way.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor. So, Professor Bambang, one of the participants is very interested to explore more about this mindfulness project management. So, he or she asked whether it is, in this current condition, it's better to look for, project managers with this kind of capabilities, doing or managing their projects using mindfulness rather than rule-based, rule-based approach. What do you think, Professor?
For me, I think project manager has to be has to have that. Or it's better to have that mindfulness kind of like approach or capabilities, because means when you do a project, although you have preparation, as I said, there is always thing that unpredictables, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you talk to many project manager, I think it's one of the comments or things they say that it's probably been done, right? Means many are just doing it because of what they experience. One of the things that I think is mentioned on by these authors that I referred is empowering, right? So
Right.
within that project team, there is some that who probably have understanding closest to what the particular uncertainties means. They probably the best in terms of dealing with that issues, right? Okay. So yeah, again, rule base is important, and it's probably not just you have to choose one of the two, right? It's probably in a way you actually do both for me, because you prepare, but when you preparing it, you have to think about those other things. Yeah? You cannot just think that everything is, if we do like this, and then everything become deterministic, right?
Right.
Okay, if there's some changes or something can be measured, right? There's always question about matrix means. I know I'm also an engineer, so my background is engineer. We also want to be able to measure anything. But in terms, there's because I also read some question in terms of the mission of the resiliency of the projects. Means actually those the authors that that I refer to,
Yes.
they have some indicators. I will not say a matrix, right? To kind of like measures the resilience, right? In the projects. But again, it's this qualitative thing. So you don't expect like percentage and everything. So it's more, having score, that's probably you have a good in terms of resiliency, right? And as I said, it's a very kind of like a new area. It's good to do research in this area and see whether we can come up with some measure, right?
Thank you, Professor. It's very insightful. Okay, I think it's. I'm going to conclude this Q&A, both professors, by asking one last question to Professor Saligram, and this is since you are covering the way we cover the managing this this or providing this resilience by knowledge areas. So how do you think in managing these stakeholders during this during these uncertainties, sometimes probably we have to deal with the counterpart. Our counterpart means our opposite, okay, our like vendors and buyers, okay, and where they are opposed in a certain condition. So how do you think that this stakeholder management can be managed in this kind condition?
Okay, there are two things. So that's opposing part. Let me take a little bit later. There are two things here. The first thing is the idea is to understand who are known stakeholder. Basically, in pandemic situation, known stakeholders are already known. Okay, so how do you manage that in a pandemic situation? Maybe a little bit different than how you would manage them in a normal situation. The only thing is that the understanding of the paradigm, the change in the way it has to be structured might have to be a little bit different. So how do you bring in their requirements, or how would you bring in the stakeholder perspective in terms of doing projects? Those things can change, and they are impacted by the external environment, which is pandemic situation over here. In terms of first thing is identifying those which known the ministries, those which known are the businesses, those which known are the suppliers who are looking at a particular project. Everybody's rules, communication, regulations that is impacted over there. Now, how do you manage the situation with suppliers? That's what you're talking to me, right? Supplier situation, right? Right, Akshan?
Yes, Professor. So in relationship between the buyers and the owners.
Yeah, buyers and owners, you see, I gave some example from Singapore. There are some example from elsewhere also. All the business are impacted, whether they are buyer or supplier. So what happens in this kind of situation? There's another question later on, which was also asked about, how should small organization do? The thing is that normal contracting situation is not working. So there can be deferring in terms of the supply, because if you defer, the whole chain is deferred, because the whole chain is impacted. But we need to maintain the minimum business all the time, minimum work on the time. So you see, when we have a contract with a supplier, there is an element called force majeure. Okay, that element has to be activated in this type of cases, and I don't think they will have trouble in that one. Force majeure will allow them to go for exceptional situation by agreement between the buyer and the seller in order to help for the benefit of the project, be it waiting for some time before start, or be it accelerating it, or be it waiting to do something in a future place. So this, we cannot look at the normal contract enforcement, but we need to use that force majeure in order to work in this kind of situation. Then it will be okay.
So it is a way to minimize, say, providing the opportunity, say, to put more claims, from suppliers to the buyers. Okay, try to take the advantage out of this. Okay, we should minimize that.
Yeah, it's not in a force majeure doesn't necessarily mean that supplier is going to have more claim. Force majeure also means that in case, for example, we normally write in nature's, if there is a nature's call or something like that, then we have to activate this force majeure. This is a nature's call. We didn't look at that one. So there should be maybe if it is not there, maybe it's the right time to think about it now, to say that in case there is an external unanticipated problem at the point of signing this contract, both buyer and supplier will sit down to find an amicable solution. That can be the way to handle this kind of situation from the past. But this is totally different. We need to perceive that this situation is not normal.
Thank you very much, Professor. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that concludes our Q&A session today. I would like to thank both distinguished Professor Bambang Trigunarsha from RMIT and Professor Saliga Pokarel from Qatar University for your valuable time, to provide your knowledge, sharing experience, and also insight to all of us, particularly the PMI Indonesia chapter members. And hence, I would like to return this session to the moderator from PMI Indonesia chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. It's good. It is good discussion. At least, you know, my perception, our perception basically is what we know. We try to, you know, put things across. Maybe we're wrong, maybe we're right, but our goal is clear.
Yep. Thank you. Actually, we should be the one who say thank you to three of you. So thank you, Prof. Saligram, thank you, Prof. Bambang, and thank you, Pak Iksan. It's an excellent session.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah. So to end this session, we will take a picture together. Please turn on your webcam, and just remind to fill the form shared in the chat box if you need the PDU or the e-certificate from this session. Okay, I will give time for around 10 seconds to turn on your webcam before start taking the picture. Okay, we have
Nice
four.
to see everybody, hello.
Hello. Okay,
Right.
I will start taking the picture. Please wait. The first screen. And then the second screen. And then the third screen. Okay, I think that's all. Many thanks and see you on the next event.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, Professor Bambang, Professor Saligram.
Yeah.
Thank you. See you in the next
Thank you.
session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you everyone.
Thanks
Stay
a
safe,
lot.
stay healthy.
Thank you all. Thank you everyone
for your insightful sharing.
Thank you.